What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, it is getting crazy in the AFC South right now. I know that Cody put out a short yesterday, but man, do we need to talk about this division right now, because what is going on in the AFC South, nobody predicted would be happening coming into this season. And yet here we are talking about it. There are currently three teams tied for first place in the AFC South: the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Indianapolis Colts, and the Houston Texans, all with 8-6 records, all with really close point differentials, all with seemingly similar records in the division. All things very interesting, to say the least. And we need to talk about it here, guys, because last year, this division was one of the worst divisions coming into, I think, the back half of the season last year. I don't remember who hosted it, but somebody reminded us. I think it was Noah Compton, I believe, from the Blue Stable. I think he said how the Texans were 1-12 or like 1-11 or something. And the Colts were, 3-8, maybe. And the Jaguars were like 6-6 or whatever. I don't know. And Tennessee, I think, had an even record or something. And so, going into that back half of the last year, where Indy kept losing, Houston kept losing, the Titans lost a few, and the Jags just went on this surge, and then they took over the reins of the best team in the AFC South. This division was really bad last year, and it's no secret that people have talked about the AFC South for a long time about being the worst division in football. For the most part, that's been true, because if you're not including the Indianapolis Colts over the last 20 years, because Indianapolis has dominated this division really for the last 20 years for the most part. And, outside of that, there's not been much to cling on to. But looking at this year, we saw a situation where everyone was talking about how Jacksonville was going to run away with this division. They were going to get 11 wins this year, probably. You could argue maybe 12. Now, again, they could still get 11 wins this year. Very much could. But then you talked about it. You thought maybe Tennessee might be in that mix with, 8 or 9 wins. And, Indy and Houston were projected to be at the bottom with, 5, 6, maybe 7 wins if you can scrap them together. But here we are in a situation now where teams have just overloaded on expectations with how they have played this year. You're talking about the Indianapolis Colts with first-year head coach Shane Steichen, a whole new offensive coaching tree. You have your rookie quarterback go out in the first couple weeks of the season. Your star running back hasn't played for half the year. You didn't have a hold on what you thought your best weapons would be this year to start out. And your offensive line, you've had 1 or 2 guys missing on that offensive line all year long. And a secondary that was decimated with injuries from the get-go in the cornerback room. And you're now sitting here telling me that the Indianapolis Colts have, from most metrics, a top 10 offense, have one of the best offensive lines again in football, and one of the best defensive lines in football this year. I think we're still top 3 in sacks for this year so far still. And on top of it, there's so many guys that are playing above expectation. And that has been the thing this year. Indianapolis living up to the hype and going above and beyond what everyone thought was possible. I did not think the Indianapolis Colts were going to be fighting for a playoff spot. I had high hopes, but I never would have thought that coming into week 16 that the Indianapolis Colts would not only be fighting for the playoff spot, but would be in the playoffs right now if the season ended in week 16. It would end and Indy would be in the playoffs. So it is crazy to think about. And when you move on from the Houston Texans, right? Houston Texans, same situation. New quarterback, new head coach, whole new coaching tree, right? And then we saw what Houston's had to deal with injuries. Their entire offensive line's been decimated at one point or another. They've had a few guys out and out here and there. And we know as of recently what they've been able to do with they're missing CJ Stroud last week. They were missing Nico Collins. They were missing Tank Dell, right? So the injuries have been piling up for the Houston Texans, but yet they were still able to save their season by beating the Tennessee Titans and in Nashville, which at going into that matchup, the only team that had beaten Tennessee in Nashville this year was the Indianapolis Colts 2 weeks prior to that. So Tennessee was really good at home for a good chunk of this year. So it's definitely a very interesting thing for Houston, who has revamped, and they are looking in a great position. They have every chance to make it into the playoffs. They just got to hope that either Cincy, Cleveland, or Indianapolis falls back. That's their only hope right now. And that's the thing with the injuries they have sustained recently. It does make me question how the Texans are going to do it, because they were able to hold off against the Tennessee Titans this last week, but they have to face Cleveland this upcoming week. And if Case Keenum has to play again because CJ Stroud is unable to go again, which, again, guys, he was in concussion protocol. It's not like it's uncommon to have to miss multiple weeks due to a concussion. We saw Anthony Richardson had to miss 2 weeks, suffering the same kind of concussion that CJ Stroud just got. So it will be very interesting to see how the Texans handle business against a good Cleveland team right now with that. So they might be in trouble even with CJ Stroud, let alone if they don't. That will be very interesting. Houston, if they win out, get in the playoffs. They know their backs are against the wall. They have a couple opportunities. They have every opportunity to win out. If they can get past Cleveland, that you got to face the Tennessee Titans once again, who are also banged up. And you have a good feeling that if you play them at home with CJ Stroud and hopefully Nico Collins back, and with the defense trying to get its butt back into shape, that the Houston Texans, you can definitely win against the Tennessee Titans. And then you come into Indianapolis and you end up playing them one more time. And that will be for it all. Whoever wins that matchup. And that's the big thing for Indy. You know, it's the same thing for Indy. You have a game against the Atlanta Falcons, who you believe you can beat because you are clearly the better team. The Las Vegas Raiders, who you cannot take lightly. They are a very good team, and they're a very well-coached team right now. You think from a perspective of who is more talented right now and who's in a better structure, Indy definitely is. But the Raiders are certainly no joke. They are putting together these good performances, and they are riding or dying with Antonio Pierce as their head coach. You get to those two games at home against the Houston Texans, that could very well decide the playoff winner. Very well could determine the playoff winner. And again, if Indy loses one of these last 2 weeks against any other team besides Houston, Indy could still get into the playoffs, but you also have to hope that the Buffalo Bills lose another game this year. And that's definitely not a good thing if you're Indianapolis going to fight for it. But another one that's very interesting is your Jacksonville, right? Who has lost 3 in a row. You were 8-3 before this 3-game losing streak went along. You, as the Jacksonville Jaguars, were on top of the world. You were on top of the world. You had everything for you. And you had the lead. You had the division. Nobody was looking away from it. And now we've seen Jacksonville kind of slip. It all started against Cincinnati. And then they have lost 3 straight games, all to AFC North competition, against AFC North competition. They lose to Cincinnati, Jake Browning's coming out party. You lose there in Jacksonville, and then you saw the freakish injury with Trevor Lawrence. He somehow, some way comes back the next week. He's playing against Cleveland, not quite able to get it done. And then the next week, you just finished it up. You played against Baltimore and weren't able to get that one done either. So Jacksonville, 3 straight AFC North opponents, loses all 3. And now, because of that slip and because of Houston and Indy winning 2 of their last 3, have finally tied the team that controlled the division for every stretch of it until now. So now Jacksonville again holds the tiebreaker on it because of the divisional record against us and against Houston. They have a better record than both the Texans and the Colts. The only way that Houston or Indy takes over the reins is if Jacksonville were to lose another game at some point this year and Indy or Houston wins out. They have to have better records than Jacksonville. And I think that Jacksonville is going to have a much easier slate. They have to face Tampa Bay this next week in Tampa. So they're not even leaving the state. And then they got to face Carolina. And then I think they have to face Tennessee. So there's not a lot of ways that if you're thinking of the Colts and the Texans, you're definitely thinking, man, they have it so easy. But again, Trevor Lawrence, after the game against the Ravens, was diagnosed with a concussion. So now he is in concussion protocol. So Trevor Lawrence and CJ Stroud both in concussion protocol and still unsure as to when we're going to see either one of them back. Who knows? We're going to have to keep an eye on it. But nevertheless, guys, this division is open for anyone. Who's to say Jacksonville doesn't go into Tampa, lays a goose egg, and isn't able to pull it out if Trevor Lawrence, say, were to play, and they had to rely on CJ Beathard, and it's not a great performance, and they lose. And then if Indy wins and Houston wins, then Jacksonville at that moment in time would be third in the division. They're out of the playoff picture, most likely, at that point. So it is very big for Jacksonville to be able to get back into the winner's circle. They have to put together a winning performance. Guys, this is a wild, wild situation for all of these teams. There's still so much on the line and 3 games left. No way would I've ever thought that Jacksonville, Indy, and Houston would be tied for first in the division going into week 16, and it could be anyone's division at this point. It is going to be a lot of fun. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts on this. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.